Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Coming up on our program, Bill Nye the Science Guy opened up the wacky, wonderful world of science to kids in the 90s. Now he talks to us about his mission to defend science. And are the Election Day wins for Democrats this week a sign of a comeback? We'll discuss what that and the GOP's tax reform proposal means for California Republicans. But first, Donna Brazile, the former interim chair of the Democratic National Committee, has roiled to the Democratic Party with her new book, Hacks, the inside story of the break-ins and breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. Brazile contends an agreement between the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign gave Clinton control of party operations a year before she was even nominated. Brazile also writes she considered replacing Clinton as the nominee. Donna Brazile joins me now in the studio. Donna, good to have you here.
It's wonderful to be back on the West Coast.
Well, you write in your book that when you took the Democratic Party's top job in July 2016, you looked for evidence that the DNC was, quote, rigging the system in favor of Hillary Clinton. Did you find any evidence?
I became chair because the DNC was a victim of a hacking. Mm-hmm. The hacking that occurred allowed WikiLeaks and others to release emails. After the convention, I promised Bernie that I would go back to the DNC to ensure that there was no rigging of the election process. So I did not find any evidence of the primary being rigged. But what I did find broke my heart. And I write in the book that while the Clinton campaign, along with the Sanders campaign, had signed these joint fundraising agreements, mm-hmm. the Clinton campaign had an addendum which gave them control over certain divisions of the DNC. I thought that the Clinton campaign had an unfair advantage of being able to fund the DNC, which was broke at the time. Mm-hmm. But they were funding 3 divisions of the DNC while the nominating process. It did not impact the debates, it did not impact the primary calendar, and it did not impact any votes.
And you write in your book that the fundraising agreement allowed the Hillary Clinton campaign to control finances and strategy. Doesn't that, though, count as rigging in a sense? Because it inevitably sort of moves the DNC in a certain direction against Bernie Sanders, does it not?
Well, this agreement, which took place in September of 2015, basically gave the Clinton campaign the ability to finance these divisions that they were financing applied to the fall campaign. For example, research division, they did not research Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley mm-hmm. or Lincoln Chafee or Mr. Webb. Or Hillary Clinton. They researched Donald Trump, who was becoming like one of the top Republican candidates. So financing these divisions, in my judgment, while a primary campaign is still going on, was a bad judgment on their part to do so, because it would, have us discussing rigging when in fact it wasn't rigged.
And then this week on Late Night on Seth Meyers, Hillary Clinton pretty much took your book to task. And we have one clip from that interview. Let's take a look at that.
Okay. Donna Brazile wrote a book. I know she's a longtime colleague of yours. And she sort of, in her book, made this comment that your campaign, through an agreement, had too much influence to maybe at the detriment of the Sanders campaign. She sort of walked back those comments now. Yeah. What was your reaction to that?
I didn't know what she was referring to because, as has now come out, that just wasn't the case.
What would you say in response to her?
Well, first of all, I would say to Secretary Clinton, who I respect and admire, that the memorandum of agreement that was signed between the DNC staff and her staff kept me from doing my job. It kept me, as an officer of the DNC, from doing what I believe was necessary, not only to help her win, but for Democrats up and down the ticket. The decision not to put resources in states that were critical allowed Donald Trump to break the blue wall. The firewall wasn't so strong if Donald Trump could come in there and take 78,000 votes and become president. And I believe that the Russians, with the campaign of disinformation and disruption, sought to discredit Hillary Clinton. And my job was to try to defend Hillary Clinton. But when you're chair of the party and you cannot even spend the money that you raise because of this memorandum, which I call cancer, I could not help Hillary Clinton.
One of the most explosive revelations in your book deals with Hillary Clinton's collapse following the 9/11 memorial ceremony last year. And you said you were so concerned about her health that you actually at one point considered dumping Clinton and Tim Kaine and instead nominate Joe Biden and Cory Booker. How serious were you about that?
When the video of her falling down or stumbling went viral, there was a story that appeared in Politico from a former chair of the DNC, Mr. Donald Fowler Sr., who said that the DNC should be prepared. And as chair of the party, my job was to confer with other leaders. We never had to take those extraordinary steps. But what I did do was tamp down the rumors and go out on television and say that she's going to return to the campaign trail.
As you know, many insiders, more than 100 former Clinton aides, wrote an open letter criticizing that very point in your book, that you would even contemplate something like that. Shocks them.
Well, you know, maybe they should read the book before they read excerpts and react. Anyone who knows me knows that I care deeply about our country, and I also write in the book that I knew that Hillary would be able to go on. I had to make sure, because she's the nominee of the Democratic National Committee, not reverse. I didn't report to the Clinton campaign. I was the chair of the Democratic National Committee, which nominated Hillary Clinton to be our nominee. And I supported Secretary Clinton's campaign 100%. You
yourself have been accused in the past of giving special advantage to Hillary Clinton at one point. The hacked emails that you have talked about show that when you were a CNN analyst, you tipped off the Clinton campaign on questions in Democratic debates. Why did you do that?
As a CNN contributor, not an analyst, I did not have access to CNN debate questions. What I did was I worked to expand the number of debates and town hall meetings and forums. During the winter of 2015-2016, the DNC came under withering attacks for only scheduling 6 debates. And my job as the vice chair of the party was to advocate for additional debates and town hall forums. My CNN hat was to make sure that my CNN colleagues had access to those additional town halls and debates. And then my role back as vice chair of the party was to ensure that the candidates understood that we would not just expand the debates in town halls, but we would also have diverse moderators to ensure that questions involving the death penalty, questions involving mass incarceration, questions involving the Flint water crisis. I brought it to the attention of both candidates. What I wrote in the book is that I could not find any of the questions that they said I gave to the Clinton campaign or the Sanders campaign, because my DNC account was hacked and then I lost all my emails. We couldn't verify if these emails were accurate or not accurate.
But then why did you write an essay for Time magazine? And these were your words. You said sending those emails was a mistake I will forever regret.
I did.
What kind of emails were you talking about? If it sounded like an admission that you had sent the questions to the Clinton campaign.
No, it's an admission that I sent emails to both campaigns, but I could not find them. And I said it's one that I would regret, because in not being able to find them so I could verify to the American people and to my colleagues on the DNC that I was fair to both campaigns, I could not find those emails. At the same time, Bernie Sanders' campaign went public when these revelations came out. And you know what they said? They said Donna Brazile was fair to us, too. I was fair to everybody. In fact, I was fair to Republicans, because often when I would get topics about what we would be discussing, I would call Sean Spicer. This was Sean before the White House. I was Sean and say, Sean, we're about to discuss this. What do you think? Essentially, that's how I do my job as a political commentator, not an analyst.
What were you hoping to achieve by writing this book? Why did you write it?
Because our country was under attack in 2016, and I was afraid that the American people would not fully understand the hacking, what happened, the corruption of data, the misinformation, the intent on behalf of President Putin to discredit and destroy Hillary Clinton, and of course the open wounds that I continue to see within the Democratic Party. I hope the reader will come away understanding what happened in 2016, and that we all agree to work to strengthen our democracy, to make it better, and to get the Russians out of our electoral system.
As you know, though, your book has upset a lot of Democrats. In fact, Charlie Cook of the nonpartisan Cook Political Report called your book a political suicide note. Is your book hurting the Democratic Party as it looks ahead to the 2018 midterm elections? Instead of unifying, it's basically reviving old feuds and old divisions, especially between Clinton and Bernie Sanders?
I think I've upset the consultant class, and I have no regrets in opening up a wound that wasn't going to heal properly unless we talked about it. You know, at the end of the day, if next year the Democratic Party invests in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, if the Democratic Party recruits more candidates, not just those that the Beltway decide are viable, and if ordinary citizens understand now how to protect their own personal identities from hacking, and the United States government begin to protect us from hacking, then I would have done my job.
Donna Brazile, author of Hacks, the inside story of the break-ins and breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. On now to another political shakeup this week. On the anniversary of Hillary Clinton's loss last fall, several state and local races have handed victories to Democrats. Virginia and New Jersey have new Democratic governors in the state house. For the first time, openly transgendered people were elected to state legislatures, city councils, and even school boards. And several cities elected their first black mayors. Meanwhile, California Republicans face tough decisions ahead as the Senate and House negotiate tax reform proposals that threaten to hit many Californians hard. To discuss this and more, I'm now joined by GOP consultant Sean Walsh and also Democracy in Color President Amy Allison. Welcome to you both. Well, Tuesday's election brought a wave of defeat for dozens of veteran Republicans in both state and local governments. Sean, you're the GOP strategist here. What happened?
Not a surprise, actually. Going into the election, Chris Christie was terribly unpopular in New Jersey, from his sitting out on the closed beach scenario to Bridgegate. And then Ed Gillespie, for most of the summer, was behind by almost 10 points. So this is not a surprise at the governor's race. Some of the local races, I think, were a surprise, and I think there is a blowback on Mr. Trump. I think that women and moderate Republicans and Democrats came and sent a message.
Amy?
It wasn't just a referendum on Trump, although that was very important. It was also that three other things happened. One was some of the most inspirational first type of candidates, first black mayor, first transgender, first Sikh mayor. Those are the kinds of inspirational candidates who stand firmly for the values of what we call the new American majority. That's the multiracial set of voters that are the electoral majority that elected and reelected President Obama. And what's happened is, on the ground, there are groups who are dedicated to expanding the electorate, talking to voters of color. And I believe what Tuesday showed was, as opposed to some Democrats who say we should throw away identity politics by embracing our multiracial identity and strong progressive values, we can be successful. And I hope that they learn the lesson going into the midterms in 2020.
Sean, identity politics, is that what it boils down to?
Go for it. If you're a Republican, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think identity politics is terrible. I actually subscribe to the old Bill Clinton triangulation perspective. I do think that anger does motivate voters, and so if you can harness anger, you can get people elected. But that said, I think at the end of the day, to continue to move forward and have broad-based appeal and support, you should not be doing identity politics. You should be finding as broad a base of coalition. You got to hold your base, but then move to the center, because the center actually decides elections.
Well, listen, we're in this kind of environment where President Trump himself is the biggest user of identity politics, white identity politics, and using racism as a bludgeon, either openly, when you attack immigrants, you're using identity politics. But I think the lesson for Democrats is, let's be who we are, but bolder. And that combined with very real, on the ground, as opposed to, TV ads and things like that, on the ground, talking to voters, that's the recipe for success.
But identity politics is not sustainable.
What's the lesson then for, we're hearing what the lesson is for Democrats. What's the lesson here for Republicans, do you think? I mean, Gillespie was sort of in an interesting position, right? He didn't really want to be identified with Trump. He didn't want to appear with Trump in any campaign events. But he also, in his messaging, he was aligning himself with Trump in some ways. And it seems to say you can't have it both ways.
Well, you're right. Republicans are in an awful position for three reasons. Number one, They need to get stuff done in the legislature and in Congress, and they're not doing that right now. So people are going to say, why are you here if you can't get things done? Number two, they've got the president who tweets out on a daily basis. So if you get too close to him, you get singed like Icarus, your wings fall off and you die. And number three, what is a centrist path that's going to get you the most people elected without making the Trump, rabid conservative part of the party stay with you? So it's a very, very treacherous path for Republicans right now, and I'm not sure there is an exact formula that I could present going into the 2020 election. At a minimum, for the 2018 election, the Republicans have to get things done in Congress.
So speaking of getting things done, let's talk about tax reform. How critical is it? Is it a do or die moment? On the one hand, there's this pressure now to score a legislative victory, but on the other hand, it also threatens to end some really popular tax breaks that a lot of voters like.
Like the mortgage.
Yes.
Well, from a political perspective, the Republicans have to get a victory. Now, I don't think it's do or die if they get it by December, if they get it right when they come back into session. But the more the Senate changes it up, the more that the House is going to have to go into conference, and the more likely you're going to go into the new year without a tax plan. That means all of the stories over the holidays are not just about how sales are at the Kmart or Sears, but it's going to say how Republicans didn't get anything done, and that's not what Republicans want to see over the holidays.
Yeah, what's really important to note is, I'm going to make a prediction, which is that at Democracy in Color on our website we did a study. We looked at the results of the 2016 election. We realized that there's a path to victory by investing in the new American majority electorate. I predict that Democrats are going to win back the House in 2018, and that tax is not going to get done. Rolling back Obamacare did not happen, as well as building the wall. There's a lot of things that the Republicans and Trump have said they can't get done because the parties at war with the centrist elements and the rabid elements, as you said. I want to say in California.
You're making a lot of bold predictions.
I'm making bold. I'm going to say here on Newsroom.
You're going out on a limb.
But here's the thing in California, though. I predict in California, which is the center of the resistance to Trump, and really the leaders for a policy agenda that runs counter to the Trump agenda, that we're going to attack tax policy from a different perspective. I think we're going to finally take on Prop 13, the rule that really has eviscerated education funding, among other things, in our state. I think that we have a supermajority of Democrats who are emboldened coming from districts who are expecting some proud and strong progressive moves to actually take on tax policy in our state.
Well, number one, so the shock is going to be if the Republicans don't put something on the president's desk, the president's going to go to Schumer, and they're going to start cutting deals. And so the Republicans are going to be twixt and tween when Democrats and moderate Republicans start putting legislation up. So that's a big problem for Republicans, number one. Number two, tax reform or taxes in California. You already have the split roll, that's the Prop 13 skewing businesses versus property. If they do that, I think that's disastrous for the California economy. And then you also have talked about with quote unquote single payer in California that was scored at $250 billion. I think the Democrats are, I don't know, legalizing medical marijuana. They may be in a room talking to people, because you can't do all the things the Democrats want to do from a tax reform or, increase taxes, both from a Prop 13 perspective and a single payer and pay for it, for the state to survive.
I want to take a moment to talk about the GOP seats in California, right? How endangered are they given what happened this Tuesday? I mean, we already have, Republican Congressman Darrell Issa coming out. He's in a tough re-election bid saying, you know what, I'm not going to support the current tax reform bill without changes. Do you expect more Republicans will start taking this stand as they watch what happened on Tuesday?
I think it's a real problem. If I were the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi is a Californian, I would put a lot of money and a lot of effort into attacking California Republicans. I think that, and I'm sorry to say that, I don't want to see that because I like our membership here, but I think that sends a signal and it sets the Republicans off a little bit on a national basis. So, but Democrats have their own problems. You've got a primary challenge with Mr. De Leon, with Dianne Feinstein. That's going to be a ridiculously expensive effort. So what you have here right now is you've got a civil war both in the Republican Party against itself and the Democratic Party. Where it comes out, I don't know, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, see, I hate to think of it as civil war. I think of it as a very strong indication democracy is alive and well. And the path to Democrats taking control of Congress is right through the majority people of color in those California seats, that with investment of talking to those voters, we can do just like they did in Virginia on Tuesday and win those seats.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Amy Allison with Democracy in Color, and also GOP strategist Sean Walsh. Thank you both.
Thank you.
A generation of kids fell in love with science thanks to Bill Nye the Science Guy. 20 years later, the former PBS host has a new role, taking on what he calls the anti-science movement. A new documentary reveals the man behind the bow tie. What drives Bill Nye to defend science and our planet from the threat of climate change? KQED Shiraz Sadiq caught up with Bill Nye and filmmaker Jason Sussberg, who co-directed Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill Nye and Jason Sussberg, thank you so much for being here today. Bill Nye, you've gone from being the award-winning host of a popular TV kids show to now debating creationists and climate change deniers. Why are you so passionate about defending science?
Well, it's not just defending science, it's having enough scientists and engineers to solve problems in the near future. And this is why I'm so concerned about climate change, is that's going to be the biggest problem everybody's going to face in the next few decades. But then with regard to the creationists,
Charles Darwin never thought of evolution as anything other than a theory. He hoped
we need people to be able to think critically and to evaluate evidence and to decide if something is reasonable or not.
Do you think that today science is under attack, and if so, what's fueling it?
Well, the fossil fuel industry has been successful in introducing the idea that scientific uncertainty, plus or minus 2%, whatever, about this phenomenon and this temperature that day, whatever, is the same as plus or minus 100%. There's doubt about the whole thing.
The United States will withdraw.
What do you think of President Donald Trump and his environmental policies and actions, such as deciding to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement?
Pulling out of the climate agreement is absolutely the wrong move, and I don't think it will last. That is to say, the people in this example of the Environmental Protection Agency, they're career bureaucrats. They're going to be there after he's gone. And I think very quickly everything will flip back.
So, Jason, why did you make this documentary?
At the time, it was 2014. Bill had just debated Ken Ham in February of 2014.
Mr. Bill Nye and Mr. Ken Ham.
Ken Ham is the lead pastor of this organization called Answers in Genesis. He's probably America's most successful, well-known Christian fundamentalist creationist.
You can't prove the age of the earth, so you can never prove it's old.
And David and I, the other director, were debating it amongst ourselves. Was it smart for Bill to do this? Was this a good idea?
Radiometric dating does exist. The universe is accelerating. These are all provable facts.
And then ultimately we were wondering, hey, who is Bill Nye? Where is he now? And what has he been up to since the show? And we ended up getting in a room with Bill here in San Francisco, and we pitched him on our idea for the documentary. But it was born out of sort of Bill's public reemergence in 2014 after the debate.
Do you run the risk of giving people like Ken Ham, people with anti-science views, if you will, a platform to further promote their views and make them appear more mainstream than they actually are?
Well, the answer is yes, I guess. In the short term, I definitely empowered him, but we'll see about the medium term and the long term. The debate has had almost 6.5 million views. And as I tell everybody, my audience was not there in the room, and it was online. And I'm very skeptical that 6.5 million people are watching that because they're hoping to get reinforced with creationist views. I think they're realizing how serious the problem is. That by the problem, I mean raising generations of kids who won't be able to think for themselves.
Jason, what do you think is the role of filmmakers, artists, and other non-scientists in speaking out about the value of science in society?
I mean, it's incredibly important. As a storyteller, as a filmmaker, I don't have a background in science, neither does the other director. We are not engineers, but we appreciate the scientific method. And that's how we know what we know. And we can make better decisions with more data and more evidence. And so my job as a storyteller is to provide emotional stories that convey the scientific worldview. And there's no better person to actually follow than popular science communicators like Bill.
Bill, the film shows the uneasy relationship you have with celebrity. On the one hand, both craving it and also on the other hand.
So I appreciate craving. What I wanted everybody was to be influential. But part of it is I didn't see it coming. And the other thing is it's a kid show host. People think they know you really well. It's sort of what you see is what you get. I mean, I am the guy on television. I am that same. Is that a true fact or a false fact?
Yeah, there's very little difference between the TV personality and the real human being. Bill's excited about science. He's great at explaining it, and what you see is what you get.
To that end, this whole thing, everybody, I love you all. Fans are your bread and butter, but the selfie thing is hard.
3, 2.
You got it, yeah. You don't need a countdown, just go for it. People don't want to talk to me. They want a selfie to send to their friends or something. And it is, it's hard for me.
Do you think this selfication, if you will, of society, which didn't exist when you were doing your show on PBS in the 90s, do you think that makes it in some respects harder to reach kids through science, perhaps because their attention span has gotten shorter?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, I'm just curious.
I'm kidding, that's a joke. Actually, here's what I tell everybody. Before the electric internet and mobile phones and all that, you would go to the doctor's office or the dentist's office and just watch yourself when you pick up a magazine. Just watch how fast you flip pages. People are the same. My claim is people are the same. What's different is how fast people are able to transmit to each other. That is a huge difference.
What surprised you the most about Bill Nye in the course of spending so many months working with him on this film?
I guess what was surprising was just how passionate he was about explaining the fundamentals of science every day. So everything turned into an info shop on how things work and the way they work. The flicker of a flame at dinner got explained in detail, so that was fun.
Bill, one of your mentors was Carl Sagan, the legendary astronomer whom you first met as a student at Cornell University. What influence did he have on you?
Carl Sagan changed my life. I don't think he meant to. Hey, there's a good example. I'm not sure Carl Sagan wanted to be famous, but like any professor, any teacher, he wanted to be influential. And he said, kids resonate to pure science. And that was just fantastic advice. And resonate was the verb that I remember so well. Don't just be a string of cool science tricks or magic tricks that rely on science. Focus on pure science, the big idea.
Bill Nye and Jason Sussberg, thank you so much both for being here today.
Thank you, Shiraz. This is very cool.
Thank you.
And Bill Nye, Science Guy, opens in Bay Area theaters next Friday, November 17th. And that will do it for us. For more of our coverage, go to kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.